Ask you a question. Are Aussies religious? What do you reckon? Are Aussies religious?
No.
No, over here? Yeah, over there, you think so? What do others think? What about the yays? Put up their hand. Are Aussies religious? Put up the nose. Nose, put up their hand. Aussies are not religious. Okay. A few more no's, but a couple of yays. That's great. I think if we took the census results, it would show at least that the self-perception of Aussies is that we are maybe less religious than we once were. I think that would be at least a common perception. But maybe if we change the question a little bit and said, what is it that Aussies worship? What is it that Aussies worship? What do you reckon?
Sport.
Sport. All right. Anything else?
Being Aussie.
Sorry?
Being Aussie.
Being Aussie.
Football.
Football.
Positions.
Leisure activities. Okay, yep. I think that's a big one, isn't it? We like to have a good time. We like to enjoy ourselves. Because after all, isn't that what life's about? Okay. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Aussies, I think, are worshippers. We do love things. We create things that we admire. And I think some of our technology has encouraged that, hasn't it? Because we can access some of our idols on screen, as it were. Our celebrities, our idols. And we can build statues and things like that we can look up to and admire. You know, even our cities as a whole have towering landscapes and have an atmosphere and a character to them that engages us and allows us to feel this is who we are. This is what we love. This is what gives my life meaning, to be part of this mega city or part of this particular group or supporting this particular team. So yeah, I think Aussies are actually worshippers. We may not think of it in those terms particularly as Aussies, but we are worshippers, and I think that's very human. That's something that people have done all through the history of humanity, is give worship or give worth to something other than themselves. This was certainly the case in Isaiah's time when we read the first reading from Isaiah chapter 40. And these chapters in Isaiah really pick up on the theme of what is it that we worship? Who are our idols, as it were? And who is God by comparison? One of the little acronyms they use in sport sometimes is GOAT, which spells GOAT. But it stands for greatest of all time. Who's the greatest of all time? Don Bradman, Shane Warne. Depending what area of sport you might be relating to. Ron Barassi, if you're from my vintage and my particular orientation. There's lots of thoughts about that, but we love to have the greatest, don't we? We love to think of who's the greatest and admire them and hold them up. It's natural for us to do that. And in the time of Isaiah, it was a really turbulent time. It was a time where their existence was threatened as a nation, as a people. The existence of God's people, which we knew at that time as the people of Israel, sometimes called Jacob, sometimes called other terms, but fundamentally that people that were the descendants of Abraham who under Moses had, they'd been in slavery, but under Moses they had walked through the Exodus, as you know, and ultimately finished up in that so-called land of promise. And there they were, a fairly small and in a sense vulnerable nation, except when they had really strong kings like David and Solomon, but fundamentally they were threatened by their surrounding neighbours. And in the time of Isaiah, there were the Assyrians and then the Babylonians, who were very strong powers. And these other nations worshipped other gods, worshipped other idols. And this is what Isaiah relates to that in these passages, that they would, for example, get firewood, and with some of the wood they'd burn it to keep warm, and with other parts of the wood they'd fashion it to make an idol and then bow down before it. And Isaiah says, what's going on here? And this theme here in Isaiah chapter 40 is really helping the people then and helping us today to get a better appreciation of the greatness and the grandeur of our God, that He is actually superior to all the idols that could be made back then or could be made today. Because at the end of the day, we either worship the Creator over everything or worship part of the creation, the created world, or some expression of the created world. And here Isaiah highlights for us the superiority of God over different things. He's been speaking just before we started the passage in verse 18. With whom then will you compare God? Who will you compare with God? To what image will you liken Him? As for an idol, a metal worker casts it, and a goldsmith overlays it with gold and fashions silver chains for it. People too poor to present such an offering select wood that will not rot. They look for a skilled worker to set up an idol that will not topple. So who will you compare God to? To these idols? And Isaiah says, do you not know? Have you not heard? Has it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood since the earth was founded? He sits enthroned above the circle of the earth, and its people are like grasshoppers. Here Isaiah is saying how great God is over the created order. Even we human beings, he says, are like grasshoppers. Kind of true, isn't it? If you look down from space and looked at the earth, we're just tiny little critters fluttering around on the earth, as it were, for a time. The human beings, the people are like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like a canopy and spreads them out like a tent to live in. He brings princes to naught and reduces the rulers of this world to nothing. How do you like that? He brings princes to naught and the rulers of this world to nothing. No sooner are they planted, no sooner are they sown, no sooner do they take root in the ground that he blows on them, and they wither, and a whirlwind sweeps them away like chaff. Just love that imagery. It's as though God blows on them, and they're just blown away. You know, one of the tendencies of the past world in ancient times was to deify their leaders, was it not? To deify. The Roman emperors were deified. They became little gods, as it were, that the people worshipped, and you had to worship. That's why the early Christians got into trouble. They could respect the emperor, but they couldn't worship him. And because they didn't worship him or the other idols, the early Christians were actually called atheists. That's interesting, isn't it? You know, we're atheists. That's what they called them in the first century, because they didn't worship the gods that the other people worshipped. And it's probably true today. We may not worship what other people worship. In a sense, you know, we're modern day atheists, just twisting that around there. But we easily deify dictators and autocrats in our own world today. We have some very powerful dictators and autocrats without naming names. But you know, you add the numbers together. There's some very powerful dictators in our world today that people virtually have no choice but to idolize and worship. And we're susceptible to this. I was watching a kind of a video documentary about the rise of Hitler recently, and it's kind of interesting, the rallies that were held, you know, back in the mid-1930s, and just how everyone was captivated and brought into this. And it was kind of increasingly backed up by the mobs, as it were, who ensured compliance with with this agenda and this idolization that became focused on one person. And we human beings are susceptible to that, whether we're educated or uneducated. Let's not be naive about our capacity, even if we've got university degrees, to be sucked in. And it's easy to go down that track, and we're susceptible to looking for these saviour figures to come and deliver us. And yes, we need good political leaders, but there's dangers in giving total allegiance to anyone, because, as Isaiah said, God can blow on them. They're here today, they're gone tomorrow. Hitler's, gone a long time ago, and facing in respect to the consequences of his actions. So Isaiah points firstly to the superiority of God over earthly creatures, human beings and all earthly creatures. He is far greater. Secondly, he indicates superiority over even the heavenly beings. Again, in verse 25, to whom will you compare me? Or who is my equal? Says the Holy One. Lift up your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all these? Brought a poster along, my visual aid today. The heavens, the stars. I don't think we look at the stars so much anymore, do we? You know, you can't see them.
Well, the lights from the city.
The lights from the city wash it out. And I think we're kind of in our homes and we've got electric lighting and we we've got TV screens or other screens to watch. We don't necessarily look at the stars as much as ancient peoples did. Ancient peoples went by the stars. They looked at the stars. On a bright starry night, you could probably see where you were going. So the stars, the planets, they looked up to them as they were the heavens. They were awesome. They were out of our control. They were amazing. And God says, look at these. Who created all these? He who brings out the starry hosts one by one and calls them each by name. He calls it, that's a lovely image, isn't it? God gives a name to each of the stars. It's like having pet dogs, isn't it? Cassie, Rufus, Angus, Leo, whoever else. God gives them names, just like we name our pets. God names the stars. It's that sort of imagery there. He's got total control over them, as it were. Probably more control over them than you have over your pets. Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing. He knows. He knows. Just like you know when your pet's missing, God knows when a star's missing. He's using picture language to make a point here. That God is not only superior and over all creatures of earth, he's superior and over all creatures of the universe, all being, all life in the universe. So he's speaking into the Israelites in their situation. They're surrounded by mighty powers, the Assyrians and then the Babylonians, who have far stronger armies than they do, and bow down to other idols. And God's saying to them through Isaiah, just remember who I am. You may think these guys are powerful. You might think these guys are going to be irresistible. But just remember who I am. I'm over all these things. I'm over people. I'm over the nations. I'm over the dictators and the autocrats of this world. They may not realise it, but they're going to be brought down. I'm over the heavens, the starry hosts. And then in this final part of the passage, he says, he is able, he's superior even to our capacity to weaken and lose our strength, he says in this beautiful passage. Why do you complain, Jacob? Why do you say, Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, my cause is disregarded by my God? That can be what it feels like. Have you ever felt like that? Where is God? He's forgotten me, he's forgotten us. It seems like nothing's happening. It seems like there's no hope and no future. My way is hidden from the Lord. My cause is disregarded by my God. And God answers that question. He says, do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. God is not worn out. He hasn't forgotten you because he's got to go and have an afternoon siesta because it's 40 degrees outside. God has not grown weary. God has not forgotten. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. Eagle Airways. I reckon that's a name that would take off, wouldn't you? If you wanted to start an aircraft company, Eagle Airways. I'd love to fly Eagle Airways. Anyway. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. And they will walk and not be faint. So it's a beautiful picture God paints for the people at this point through Isaiah. He's giving them hope. You may feel tired and weary. You may sometimes feel, where is God? And we can feel that today. But those who hope in the Lord renew their strength. God will be with you. God will strengthen you. God will enable you in the face of what might seem like overwhelming odds to ultimately triumph. It may not always look like that. But when we're on God's side, then that's the team to be on, isn't it? Just because those first disciples, when they followed Jesus, the rest of the world thought they'd backed a loser because they saw the one that they'd followed being taken out to a certain hilltop called Calvary to be crucified. It looked like they backed a loser. And people today might think, if you're a Christian, you've backed a loser, as it were. Christianity, we've been there, we've done that, we've moved on, we've progressed, we know more now, we've studied some science, we've studied the stars. We've got all this knowledge now. We've moved on, and we're sophisticated. You guys are back to losing, like those first disciples. But we know that ultimately they didn't. That something happened on the third morning. There was a resurrection. There was life. There was the most unlikely victory of all. And the followers of this risen Christ were participants in that victory, whatever the circumstances that they faced. And let me just finish with how that is expressed in St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians. I love it where he prays for them. And he says in verses around 18, 19, 20, that I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened, in order that you may know the hope to which he has called you, the riches of his glorious inheritance in his people, and the incomparably great power for us who believe. That power is the same as the mighty strength he exerted when he raised Christ from the dead and seated him at his right hand. The same power that resides even in our weak bodies, our frail and failing bodies, is the same power that he exerted when he raised Christ from the dead. Friends, whatever the challenges you have in life, whatever the challenges we may face as a church community, as a people, let us join the eagles and soar with their wings today. Let me pray. Father, we thank you that you are the GOAT, the greatest of all time. And we offer you the worth and the glory that belongs to you. And we thank you, we have the privilege of participating in giving that praise to you. And we ask and invite you today into our hearts and lives that we might be captured afresh